And we are, as a people, inherently and historically
Wake up!
opposed to secret societies, the secret oaths, and the secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Welcome to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. These are the conspiracy queries that Alan Park is going to be talking about today. We have a relatively focused show today. We are going to explore the world of the Koch brothers. Who? Through subliminal advertising, did I just make you feel thirsty to crack open a tin of cola? That's not who I'm talking about. The name Koch brothers is something that everyone should know and not many people do. I'll just give you the spelling now in case it's driving you crazy. It's K-O-C-H. Just like the former mayor of New York, who spelled his name that way, and his name was Ed Koch. Koch, Koch. It depends on what side of the table, I guess, you're sitting on as to how to say that name. But the Koch brothers are who we are going to be focusing on today. We have a great interview with a filmmaker who is got a great film together about the Koch brothers that you should see and learn about, because these fellas manipulate a lot of things. And there's a government shutdown going on right now, and shortly I'm going to get into how that happened and how it didn't happen. A lot of people are led to believe a few angry people just got together and decided to enough is enough, and that's not really what's happening right now. But before we get to that, before we get to the Koch brothers' shenanigans and a movie that will hopefully expose them to the world as the devils that they are, let's go back in time to 1997. Were you alive then? I'll bet you must have been, or you probably aren't listening to the show. A very beautiful woman who lived in England most of her life was unfortunately died. Of course, I'm talking about Lady Diana, Princess Di, who was no longer married to her Prince Charles of a husband, as he was busy doing other things to other people. Diana was, of course, you know, dating or engaged to Dodi Al-Fayed, and she seemed to be having a pretty good time, and then one day she was dead. Of course, at that time, there were a lot of odd anomalies regarding the circumstances of her death. People were quick to jump on the driver of her limousine as being a drunkard and lost control of the car. The narrative switched to, no, it was the paparazzi chasing them around, and they lost control of the vehicle. And a lot of the more interesting questions of that unfortunate night were, why were they driving on the route that they were driving if they were heading from the hotel that they had left to their particular flat in the city? They were going about a route that was particularly unlikely that you would want to take to get there, forcing them to go through the Pont d'Alma tunnel. And unfortunately, she did not come out the other side in one piece. And of course, at the time, we were just told it was a car accident, it's unfortunate, it's terrible, and we're moving on. And then the whole monarchical reaction from Queen Elizabeth, where she didn't really say much about it, the Queenie didn't, and we were led to believe it was just an unfortunate incident, and anybody and everybody that was asking questions about what really happened there was portrayed, you know this is coming, as a lunatic. Of course, there were a lot of strange pieces of information that weren't really floated out into the mainstream a lot, like the cameras that are en route to the tunnel that prior to that accident had always been working, and there were always videotapes available of the goings-on those streets. Somehow, during her run in that car to the tunnel, those cameras weren't working. And so there was no video record of what is normally being photographed. But don't worry about that. It's probably you're just a conspiracy idiot. And they bury these kinds of things. The fact that several of the people who were involved in passing by there didn't think it was that horrible a state that she was in physically after the accident. That she took an incredible amount of time in the ambulance to get from the crash site to the hospital. Just an inexcusable, unbelievable amount of time that suggested there was some kind of delay in her reaching the hospital and getting proper help. And then, of course, the father of Dodi Fayed saying that there must be some kind of conspiracy and trying to get to the bottom of it. None of that seemed to tip anyone's awareness into the fact that maybe there was something a little more nefarious going on than just a simple car accident at the hands of a drunk guy. And as it almost always is the case with these conspiracies, if left out there, that it is now turned up that an SAS member, which is the elite military guard, says that Princess Diana was murdered in a job, and it was a job, had to be done, and that the SAS soldier that was involved has told his wife this story. So I'm turning now to the Express in England, the home of the Daily and Sunday Express, a fine organization. Yeah, I know this isn't the most verified news source around, but if you check the internet, you'll see that there's all kinds of information that do, in fact, point to this particular gentleman claiming that she was murdered. And it says, his description of a clinical mission adds to growing evidence that her death in a car crash was not an accident, and it will heap further pressure on the Metropolitan Police to fully reopen the case. The latest extraordinary details of the alleged plot have been recounted by the ex-wife of the former SAS sniper, called here Soldier N. She has said he told her he knew all along that his colleagues were responsible for her death, but the soldier sought to justify it by saying, "It's an order. A job's a job." According to the sniper's ex-wife, he told her Diana was allegedly murdered alongside her Muslim lover Dodi Fayed when a piercing light was shone directly at the car they were traveling in. Now divorced, that soldier's ex-wife was interviewed by Scotland Yard detectives last month, and she told them that her former husband decided to confide to her after taking Prince William, then 26, on an advanced driving course in 2008. He told his wife he already knew of the alleged plot to kill her, but a face-to-face encounter with the young prince convinced him to open up to his wife for the first time. During her police interview, she is said to have told police, "We were talking about it, the driving course, and I was saying how lovely it was that Princes William and Harry were doing so well, and that it was sad that their mum wasn't here to see it." That's what they say in England, mum instead of mom. Then he said to me, "One of the guys was responsible for the accident, for the death of Diana. I was shocked. I believed what he said. He went on to tell me that it had to be done in a tunnel, that people had been monitoring them, and that a light was shone in the driver's eyes." And during the chat between them, he also spoke about the top secret unit's apparent ambivalence towards Diana's death. She said, "When I asked how anyone could do something like that, he said, 'It's an order. A job's a job.'" Some people do horrendous things just because their boss tells them to. Some of those people belong to specific secret orders that actually do run a lot of things, if not everything, on the planet. And I'll get into that topic on a different show. But Soldier N's wife, back to the story, the former wife claims he told her the hit was carried out by SAS soldiers riding motorbikes, acting on orders from individuals from the inner circle of the royal family, who disapproved of Diana's burgeoning romance with Dodi. Now, I don't know why they did it, but looks like they did it. So that's what sort of came out first, that news story. And, of course, there have been stories of that nature before then, but this one is sort of gaining a lot more traction. And then subsequent to that, another article comes out, this one also from the Express, that the former SAS soldier who claimed Diana was murdered, this fella that was telling his wife about it, has fled Britain. The ex-SAS sergeant, known as Soldier N, allegedly fled the UK days before he was due to be questioned by police over Diana and Dodi Fayed's death. The former sniper claimed Diana and Dodi's driver, Henri Paul, was blinded by the intense light that I just talked about already. His estranged wife had told Scotland Yard the claims were utterly convincing, and he was reportedly due to meet DCI Philip Easton for questioning, but he disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. Speaking to the Sunday People, I guess another publication, a source said Soldier N is the key to this inquiry, as he is the person who made the claims about Diana's murder. Pressure on him has been mounting since the original story broke. He was aware police wanted to interview him. No one can be sure why he has gone. But if he knows about the wife's complaint, that may have tipped him over the edge. The paper reported that Soldier N's ex made a complaint to the police, alleging she believed he had smuggled thousands of pounds of stolen money. So the plot thickens. And then it turns out that there is now a photograph of snipers at or near the scene. This from the news.com.au from Australia. Photographs of a British SAS sniper lying on a Welsh bridge with his long-range rifle have prompted a fresh investigation into a Princess Diana assassination theory. Reports from London's Mail on Sunday. The Mail on Sunday. Not that they got mail on Sunday. Wouldn't that be nice? No, that's a newspaper. Revealed the image was found on a computer belonging to the Special Forces marksman known as Soldier N, who is said to have told his wife. And we already heard about that. The picture shows a soldier in a public area in the Welsh countryside, aiming his rifle towards a highway, as if poised to open fire. It's reported that the image was passed to the Metropolitan Police, which is investigating the improbable assassination theory. They have to throw that in there. Improbable. Yeah, it's improbable that there was an assassination based on all these loose ends that no one's been ever to tie up. No one's ever been able to tie up. It's improbable. They always put a little curve and spin on these things. Yeah, the allegation first came to light during the second court-martial of Sergeant Danny Nightingale, who was found guilty of illegally possessing a gun and ammunition. It was outlined in a letter written by the mother-in-law of Soldier N, who was a key witness for the prosecution. The picture was one of 90 images of Special Forces soldiers found on Soldier N's home computer. So we're kind of waiting for this guy to get back and see what happened and see if his tale holds up. But, of course, we don't know his name. We don't know where he is. We're not sure. Yes, sometimes we can't get to the bottom of things because we don't know who is actually doing the manipulating. It's often difficult to get to the bottom of that question. Sometimes we manage to. It's never easy. Right now there's a government shutdown taking place. As I record this, hopefully by the time you listen to it, it's over. But why did it happen? And how did it take place? A lot of people think that the government's just arguing, and so they've decided to pull the plug on things. It's not really that simple. A lot of other people think it's the Republicans. Well, a lot of Republicans were against the shutdown. A lot of people think it's the Tea Party. And while the Tea Party has been instrumental, and once again we're faced with what appears to be the minority of a minority directing the good ship America rather than the nonsensical version of majority rules. that seems to be the case. A lot of people think it's the Tea Party, and the Tea Party, while instrumental in getting this thing going, if it's worth anything at all, it's worth it to realize. I hope that people have gotten to the point where it's not really about the majority rule in America, as we are so often led to believe. How could it be when the Tea Party is such a small percentage of a right-wing extremist faction, which is such a small percentage of the overall citizenry of the United States, and yet their desires have led to a shutdown that most people are against, including a lot of Republican participants in the shutdown. So how do these guys do this? And the answer is with the Koch brothers that I spoke about earlier. These two fellas who are deep into their, well, let's just come right out and say it, deep into their twilight years, hopefully, are orchestrating things from behind the scenes and often away from prying eyes. And you know how they do it? Money. Is that really? That wasn't a hard question. You knew where I was going with that. It's through money. And through money, they can create organizations and boards and committees that seem nonpartisan, that seem helpful. Citizens United is one of those boards. Boy, does it ever look like an American thing. It's got the eagle in there and a circle with stars and the stripes of the flag behind it, looking tough. Citizens United, according to Wikipedia, is a conservative, nonprofit organization in the United States. So right away you have to question the fact, is it really nonprofit if the guys that are using it are profiting immensely? And now I know they put a lot of money into creating this thing, but it is achieving a political and then therefore corporate and then therefore financial windfall at the end of it. Its president and chairman of Citizens United is David Bossy, which is a great name for an organization if you're going to be the president. President Bossy. It is best known for the U.S. Supreme Court case on campaign finance, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission. We won't get too much into that, but Citizens United, still with Wikipedia, on the overview section, describes its mission, buckle up, as being dedicated to restoring the United States government to citizens' control and to assert American values of limited government. I guess that means a shutdown. Freedom of enterprise, strong families, unless they're not white, and national sovereignty and security. To fulfill this mission, Citizens United undertakes various marketing projects, including television advertising and feature-length documentaries. Citizens United was founded in 1988 with major funding from Charles and Bill Koch. Yeah, they stretch back to the 80s, don't you know? David Bossy has been its president since 2000. The offices are on Pennsylvania Avenue in the Capitol Hill area of Washington. Well, that's handy. Then you can just run memos to your lackeys down the street. The Associated Citizens United Foundation is tax-exempt as well. These cows don't even have to pay for the disruption that they're causing. So that's what Citizens United is. And Citizens United is brought to you by the Koch brothers. The very same Koch brothers who another website says are creepy beyond belief. This is from Death and Taxes. It's deathandtaxesmag.com. The 5 creepiest things about how the Koch brothers engineered the shutdown, which was revealed, of all places, in the New York Times, a particularly mainstream outlet. It revealed how the Koch brothers and Reagan Attorney General Ed Meese engineered this here shutdown we're dealing with right now and how they'd been planning it ever since Obama was reelected. I wasn't especially shocked by it myself, says the writer. Hell, half the Tea Party people in the House actually campaigned on it, which is why I have been portrayed as hell with the whole, oh well, it's really both parties at fault here line of reasoning that some people have been trying to take. Anyway, in case you're not hep to it, months and months before the shutdown happened, FreedomWorks, one of the fake astroturfing groups set up by the brothers Koch with the assistance of Reagan Attorney General Ed Meese, created a blueprint for how it was all supposed to go down and a toolkit for dealing with it. So here are the 5 creepiest things about it, according to this website. The fact that it has been in the works since February of 2012. You know, if you look a little deeper, it probably goes beyond that. The fact that they actually told people what to tweet. The key hashtags for this week are Don't Fund It, Make DC Listen, Defund Obamacare, and Obamacare. Number 3, they not only knew the Republican Party would be blamed for the shutdown they engineered, they came up with talking points to repeat to the media in order to try to deflect said blame. Number 4, this whole spiel about how it's totally fine that people with pre-existing conditions don't get to have health care. Yeah, that's always one that rocks my world. This is the richest nation in the world, the greatest country on the planet, and we can't afford health care? You're so full of... Oh, okay, I'll save my bleep or anything to bleep there. We'll just move on. And number 5, the end game. The end game is not just about defunding the Affordable Care Act. This is about getting rid of Medicare and Medicaid. It's also about privatizing the Veterans Administration and getting rid of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, which was brought in by Nixon, a Republican that everybody thought was way too far to the right. Now that program is way too far to the left. The Department of Energy as well, and the Department of Education. All the things on the Koch brothers' wish list, because they're rich dudes who want to be more rich, and they want the American people to help them get there. Once all those things are privatized, we'll need more corporate solutions to fill the services they provide. And guess who can provide those corporate solutions? The Koch brothers, who have engineered an entire grassroots movement dedicated to helping them get more rich at the expense of the American people. It's straight up bonkers, he says. Not only is it bonkers, it's even more incredible. You got to tip your hat to these people who manage to get poor folks to go along with them in the hopes that one day they'll be just as rich as the Koch brothers, and they too will benefit wildly from the income that comes from shutting everything down. Bernie Sanders is an independent in the House and was recently on MSNBC having a chat about it. And Bernie had a few things to say and sort of brought it to the attention of people, the Koch brothers, which is perfect timing for the movie. Listen to this first question, though. I quite enjoy this. The gentleman from MSNBC asks Bernie if how he feels about the folks in the House being perceived as children. And with the skill of a seasoned politician, Bernie deflects that blame all onto the Republicans rather than the Republicans and the Democrats. I thought it was pretty cagey, and it's almost subliminal. So check this out.
You heard the new ad out is calling John Boehner a crybaby. Is that fair, or is that an overreach in trying to equate Congress to children?
I think most people would think that Republicans are acting kind of childish. But here's the important point.
In this clip, Bernie breaks it down as to what the Koch brothers are up to and how long they've been planning it. Have a listen.
Let's not kid ourselves. This shutdown is not something that just came about a couple of weeks ago through Ted Cruz. This has been planned by the Koch brothers and other very, very wealthy people from the day after Obama was reelected. And what they're feeling is, let us go to the extreme. Let us be prepared to shut down the government, not pay the national debt. Let's use every ounce of leverage that we have, even if it means catastrophic pain for America and the world, so long as we get our way.
And here's where Bernie brings it all home and puts it together. And I hope people do their homework on this and become aware of who the Koch brothers are and how they operate and how long they have been operating and what their real agenda is, and that they're masking their seemingly humanitarian desires to get to a place where they really are just the two richest guys in the whole country. Take it away, Bernie.
On your website, you go on to say there's a larger end game here. Their agenda is to end Social Security and Medicare, abolish the minimum wage, destroy the EPA, and undo every other program enacted in the past half century to protect working families in America. Are the two sides so far apart, sir, on this issue that government is basically broken from the inside out?
Now, the real issue is, if you look at what the Koch brothers' agenda is, look at what many of the extreme right-wing people believe. Obamacare is just the tip of the iceberg. These people want to abolish the concept of the minimum wage. They want to privatize the Veterans Administration. They want to privatize Social Security, end Medicare as we know it, massive cuts in Medicaid, wipe out the EPA. You don't have an Environmental Protection Agency anymore. Department of Energy, gone. Department of Education, gone. That is their agenda, and many people don't understand it. Koch brothers have poured hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the Tea Party and to all other kinds of ancillary organizations to push this agenda. So what you are fighting now is a continuation of the class warfare that has been going on in this country for the last many years. The rich are getting richer, poverty, number of people in poverty, all-time high, middle class disappearing, and these guys, using Citizens United and other forms, are now banging away and doing everything that they can to get more tax breaks for the people on top and devastating cuts for working families.
And finally, from the website politicsusa.com, where Bernie Sanders has put the blame squarely on the Koch brothers. I love it when a politician starts with, let's not kid ourselves. You hardly ever hear that anymore, especially if it's leading to anything that's truthful. But it's true that the Koch brothers, and give them a call, by the way, the Koch brothers. Look their phone number up and give them a ding and see if they'll talk to you about this. Good luck with that. If you manage to get through, please contact me here at the show and let me know how that went. But the Koch brothers don't like the kind of attention that Bernie Sanders brings to them. It says here in Politics USA, they want to operate behind closed doors. The Koch brothers know that their agenda is doomed if the American people understand what they are trying to accomplish. Charles and David Koch are happy to let their Republican stooges, like John Boehner and Ted Cruz, take the fall for them, as long as they are willing to spend the money. Republican politicians are disposable goods. The Koch brothers are the real power behind the government shutdown. The point that Senator Sanders made cannot be expressed often enough, and I agree with that point of view. Politics USA, and that's why I'm spending a little bit of time on it. That's why we're doing a show about the Koch brothers. The real ideology and agenda behind the government shutdown belongs to the Koch brothers. The Koch boys hate Obamacare because they don't want the working and middle-class people to have the same access to health care that they do. They don't want to pay for it. They are opposed to anything that empowers working-class individuals because they are seeking a new Gilded Age where the employer controls the lives of the employees, which makes perfectly good sense if you think about the fact that police forces and the judiciary forces, court systems, cities, municipalities, the country, all of them are a network of corporations. If you really think you are being governed and ruled by a government, you've been tricked. At the heart, that was a diversion, by the way, from politicsusa.com website, not to be confused that I was reading that. At the heart, back to the website, the Koch brothers are cowards who hide behind Citizens United and several different other organizations such as ALEC in order to anonymously advance their agenda. A senator like Bernie Sanders scares the Koch brothers. He ignores their money and rallies the masses to join the fight. If the American people are ever going to get their government back from the conservative money men, they are going to have to send more people like Bernie Sanders to the House and Senate. good luck with that. He's an independent. People are driven into the mindset that their choice is all about conservative Republicans or progressive Democrats, and it's just not the reality of the situation. So the board is tilted in the favor of the Koch brothers. Let's hope that they can be exposed, become a topic of discussion, become a name that everybody can instantly pronounce rather than wonder how to pronounce it and wonder what they mean, and expose their agenda as wide open as can possibly be. So I think it's now time to move on to our interview. I'm on the phone with Carl Diehl, and he is going to talk to us about, I find it to be a very exciting prospect that this movie is being made because it's about the Koch brothers. And when I talk to people about the Koch brothers, they think I'm talking about the family that makes pop. Most people that I've come across are unaware of the Koch brothers, and I'm so grateful now that this movie is coming out, and I hope it does well. Carl Diehl, hello, and thanks for coming on Conspiracy Queries.
Hey, Alan, I'm glad to be here. A lot of folks also call it the Koch brothers or the Koch brothers.
Depending on
the
your...
correct pronunciation is Koch.
It is Koch, but it's spelled
Yes.
Koch if you need to Google that. And no offense, anybody listening, you probably need to Google that, and you should Google that because these guys are heavily influential and many would say not in a good way. Is that right, Carl?
Well, we can let the audience be the judge of that, but, you know, my partner Tia Lesson and I made a film called Citizen Koch, and it's really looking at the impact that big money has on the American political system and on the public discourse in the aftermath of the 2010 Supreme Court ruling called Citizens United. And that was the infamous ruling that essentially, the way it's understood is that it gave citizenship rights to corporations and certified the right of free speech for corporations in the political arena. So in other words, it deregulated campaign spending, and corporations could now spend money out of their general coffers to elect or defeat candidates.
And that is, you would say, or should we leave it to the audience, unfairly tips the direction that the good ship democracy is sailing?
Very much so. I mean, let's look at this in context. Just if you look at the Supreme Court decision there, and then we can talk about the film.
Sure.
But Citizens United is a right-wing organization set up by folks who were kind of working on the fringe, the outer edges of the Republican Party, way out there, who had a strategy, a legal strategy, to deregulate campaign finance with the goal of super-enfranchising the wealthiest Americans. And so one of the trends that we've seen in the last several years here in the States is this trend is different types of creative legislation that super-enfranchises wealthy Americans, but also at the same time attacks the voting rights of working people and people of color. So we're disenfranchising people of average and below average means. And this is all happening simultaneously. So, you know, the film that we made isn't a partisan film. It's not pro-Democrat, it's pro-Republican, it's pro-facts. And the facts show you that it's folks on the right in this country who are engineering these fundamental changes in the way our democracy works. And that's not to say that the prominent Democrats don't also participate and avail themselves of these loopholes, but you know, it's really working to the benefit of the Republican Party above all.
Well, it sounds like it. What catches me a bit of a thorn in my paw is that you're saying this is a very well-funded right-wing Republican, specifically very rich families putting this together, the Citizens United, and yet the name Citizens United. I mean, it's obvious they did a little think tank work on that because it sounds like a great idea. You know, it sounds like the name itself. It's a very Orwellian named organization. It's not about the citizens, and it's definitely not about uniting the citizens. It's the exact opposite.
Sure. It's well, Look, everybody who has a political agenda has creative ways of masking some of their work under the guise of nonprofit, charitable work. If we want to talk about the Kochs specifically, we named the film Citizen Koch because Charles and David Koch are billionaire industrialists, and they would call themselves conservative philanthropists, but they're expert at deploying their billions into the political process in very creative ways that ultimately rig the system to their favor and to their financial benefit. And one of the ways in which they do that is through front groups like a group called Americans for Prosperity, which figures prominently in our film Citizen Koch. And the question is, for whom are they trying to secure the prosperity? They use language that appeals to working people and people of average or below average means. And they are able to rally them to their cause, like the Tea Party. Essentially, we have this conundrum in the States where you see millions of working people who are actively lobbying against their own best interests, along with the Tea Party. So that's one of the many ways in which they deploy their money into the political process. And we chose the name for the film because, in the aftermath of Citizens United, the lines are blurred between, what a corporation is and what a citizen is, and Kochs happen to be both because they have a private corporation that's the second largest privately held corporation in the world. So,
how do they get people to actively vote against their own interests? What is the methodology there? How do you convince someone to be fervent and right behind a movement that is going to leave oneself in a worse place? What kind of tricks do they use?
We were really interested in trying to find the answer to that. As Americans here, we're filmmakers, but I spent a good chunk of 2010 sitting on the couch watching Glenn Beck, 2009 and 2010, and Tia, who's both my creative collaborator and also my life partner, issued an ultimatum and said, if this is what you're going to do,
sitting on the couch
turns to mush, let's make a movie.
If you're going to just sit on the couch and watch Glenn Beck all day, you better put a positive spin on it, get something out of it.
Well, let's figure out why it's happening instead of just ranting at the screen. And I mean, look, I filled up our DVR. I got hundreds of hours of that material dumped to tapes. I just became obsessed with it. So, but anyway, in a more serious note, we decided to go out and try and figure that out. And so what we did is we spent a lot of our time in Wisconsin, in the heartland of America, in the middle of a political battle when the conservative...
The Scott Walker state.
The newly elected Governor Scott Walker, whose largest single supporter during his first election came from the Kochs coffers, and also through third-party organizations that were empowered by the Citizens United decisions, such as the Republican Governors Association, where they don't have to report who their donors are. And so moving from there, what we ended up doing was spending time with lifelong Republicans who were sort of rethinking their role because Scott Walker's reforms and say anti-labor reforms were hitting them in their pocketbook and right at the kitchen table. And so we decided not to look at the usual suspects, but to spend time with lifelong Republicans and then some of the Tea Party folks. And look, the best answer that I get to the question that you asked me is they bring people along with emotion, not facts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a central organizing principle within the Tea Party that we've seen is to take back our country, that language, that take back our country from whom?
A black president?
Yes. So I think that plays into it.
Mm-hmm. That's unfortunate.
And then you have the three, the other emotional issues, the God, guns, and gays. That you can organize people around in an emotional way off and not necessarily a rational way.
Yeah, let's not leave
and then you can jam all your other issues right into that.
Let's not leave abortion out of that either. Now, I don't want to. This isn't going to turn into a debate or a discussion on the pros and cons or the rights and wrongs of abortion, but it is in fact a law that was passed 40 years ago. The Roe v. Wade, and then it's got to come up in every election cycle, in every big election cycle, and the Republicans are always the ones bringing it up. And while they're doing that and getting everybody whipped into a fervor about it, and as you say, using the emotional tactics, things like ALEC get drummed up, and no one seems to know what they are.
Yes, yeah.
It's like a smokescreen.
It is. It seems to have that effect. Unlike Canada, I think we're grossly underinformed here about how our politics really work.
Well, we're working towards that. Our politicians are doing their darndest to make sure we're misinformed and underinformed as well. There's a war on science going on right now. It's a disaster.
And we're joined at the hip in that particular battle right now with the XL pipeline.
Exactly. So that's where our government is definitely falling along those lines. I mentioned, Alec, it's the American Legislative Exchange Council. Can you tell us about that? Is that touched on at all in your film?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's one of the motivators in. Look, Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin, was elected with outside money in 2010, and he also immediately seemed to be reading out of the ALEC playbook on things like labor and right-to-work legislation. While he didn't try and push right-to-work legislation through, he did try to end collective bargaining rights for public employees in the state of Wisconsin. He passed voter ID legislation, which limits the pool of people who actually are able to vote. So, ALEC is one of these organizations that's funded by a lot of corporations and wealthy individuals to put through a playbook of legislation at the state level. So, while everybody's looking at the 2012 presidential election between, Romney and Obama, the real damage is happening at the state level.
Right.
And that's what we wanted. That's what really interested us in this film, and that's why we focused on Wisconsin.
And isn't it true as well that just to take away from that and going back to the federal stage, that the Kochs were instrumental in providing a lot of money for Newt Gingrich while he was running as during the Republican primary, and then when he was out, focused more of that cash backing behind Romney?
Indeed, yes.
It just seems like they're buying these guys. Where is the supposed democracy? It's he who has the deepest pockets, which is the very antithesis of democracy.
It is, and look, I think that this is a transpartisan issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It has an impact on all of our lives. And we made this film as an entertaining story. But also a hard-hitting expose that we hope appeals to folks on both sides of the aisle in this country and will help, that people are going to use this as an organizing tool to get people engaged and to try and address some of the problems that Citizens United has created, not just at the federal level, but at the state levels, the local levels.
Yeah, and convincing people that union representation, which took years to put together and now only represents a much smaller portion of the employed, and they're still railing against it. How do they convince, if I can specifically focus on this, how do they convince people, I guess what I'm getting into is the right to work legislation. What exactly does that mean? In Scott Walker's Wisconsin, where were they before and how were they better off? And how is it worse now for a worker or a union member in Wisconsin now that these changes have gone through?
Well, one of the teachers in our film who's been teaching the Wisconsin public schools for 25 years essentially lost her pension overnight, lost $150,000 overnight when the bill was signed. they didn't exactly cut. They didn't directly cut the pay of working people, but they upped their contributions, and they got a paycheck reduction, not a cut in pay. And so people felt the impact immediately. And one of the things that's happened in the public sector workers like, corrections officers and nurses and teachers, is people are fleeing those jobs and looking for more stable, better paying jobs elsewhere. And so those positions are being filled with people who don't have any experience. And so, the experience of citizenship and the rights of citizens to, the best public education available has been profoundly affected by these changes in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the birthplace of a lot of things, right? A lot of concepts. It's the birthplace of public employee unions. It is the first place that they were organized. It's the birthplace of the progressive political movement in the United States under the leadership of Fighting Bob La Follette. It's also the birthplace of the Republican Party in the 1850s in a small town called Ripon, where renegade Whigs, abolitionist Whigs set up this party based on the ideals of sort of a utopian commune of free man and free land. So, it's kind of interesting to see how everything in Wisconsin, all these lofty concepts devolved into eliminating the rights of working people, or the ability of working people to earn a living wage to the benefit of corporations. Because while wages were being cut for public employees, there were massive tax breaks being bestowed upon corporations.
Yeah. Well, listen, if your movie, it's such a topic, and I said at the beginning of the interview, a lot of people, and I mean, I'm in Canada, but a lot of people that I've spoken to and with and about this, and some people that are American, just don't even know who the Koch brothers are, which is bad overall because you really should know what's going on. But how are you going to try to market this movie so that people want to go see it versus a well-known subject matter?
Sure. Well, there has been a lot of interest in the topic of campaign finance over the 2012 election. It was nightly fodder on the news. With billionaires like Sheldon Adelson and organizers like Karl Rove raising and spending hundreds of millions of dollars. But, look, we were very, very proud to have a partnership with public television. They were producing partners on this film for the past year, and we were delighted that we were going to be able to hit the largest available audience for a documentary in the United States, which is free TV.
Yeah.
And, this film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. And during the lead up to the festival, we began, as we were finishing the film, and this was in November of 2012, we began to receive a series of frantic phone calls and text messages from the folks at the PBS funding agency. It's a small agency called ITVS, 100% taxpayer funded. They're charged with both financing high-quality documentary programming and also advocating for their broadcast on public television. And we were headed to a series called Independent Lens. Well, what happened after we got into Sundance is they decided they disapproved of our title, Citizen Koch, and frantically wanted us to change the title and ultimately change some of the content of the film. And when we asked why, they were very, very evasive.
Because they got a lot of money from the Kochs? I'm just a guess.
It took a Google search, and we realized that David Koch not only is a major donor to public broadcasting, but he was sitting on the boards of the two largest flagship stations for public broadcasting, WNET in New York and WGBH in Boston. And so, it's not as though David Koch had to pick up the phone, but he
was in the room.
Checkbook.
Yeah.
And people and public broadcasting executives decided to self-censor out of fear of upsetting one of their major
contributors,
private donors.
Right.
So what we saw happening and what we've seen happen is a private donor was able to essentially dictate both programming decisions and funding decisions of a public agency.
Unbelievable.
And that's outrageous.
Yeah, that is outrageous. Do you see a way out of this at all? I mean, people seeing your movie and hopefully learning about what they can do. Is there a way to reverse this? Can we undo the Scott Walker? Can we go back to, or is it just a bit of a lost cause at that point, or what can be done?
Well, I think a lot can be done. There's a group called Move to Amend, or it's a movement throughout the country where people are organizing on the local level, at cities and state levels, to pass resolutions saying that they are not going to abide by the decision in Citizens United. There are a number of movements, a number of amendments in consideration in laws, new laws in consideration in both the Senate and the House of Representatives on the federal level that are geared towards reversing Citizens United. You know, it's pretty tough to pass a constitutional amendment, but there are some efforts towards that as well. So there's a lot of organizing that's happening. And look, money in politics is a galvanizing force. It's not a Republican problem. It's not a Democrat problem. It's a democracy problem. And so there are all kinds of ways for people to engage, and people are already doing that. And, you know, we're hoping this film can just be another piece in that conversation.
Well, I'm going to thank you for having this conversation, and I'm going to urge everyone to chase this movie down and get a look at it, because you really need to know about the things that are addressed by Carl in the movie Citizen Koch, which is great that you didn't change the name. What were some of the suggestions to change it to? Did they give you any?
They had no suggestions, and we're open to any suggestions. But when it became clear that they were making the request for political reasons, that ended the conversation for us right there, because we felt that was inappropriate.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, folks can go to our website, which is citizenkoch.com, to learn more about the film, to watch the trailer. We also have a Kickstarter campaign that has a video that has a lot of new information about how public broadcasting censored the film. And we invite people to go to the Kickstarter page for Citizen Koch as well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you put that in there at the end. So I thank you for your time, and maybe when the film makes a bit of a splash and there's some feedback from it, you'll come back on the show.
Love to. Thanks so much, Alan.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Please offer comments or complaints by emailing conspiracyqueries@gmail.com or on Twitter @con_queries or at our website, conspiracyqueries.com. Thanks for listening.